Hey there. Welcome to the land of yucky cold weather. I know that's a lot of places, but it's definitely here. We don't have the ice they have a little further north, but it's pretty yucky. It's cold and windy and wet. I tried to go for a walk. I'm not going to make my Fitbit happy again today. I'm going to fall short, I'm pretty sure. I went walking this morning with Indy, put her leash on, and we head out. I'm just going to go around the block, check things out, see how the weather is. And I could see when I went out it was pretty yucky. And we got the furthest we could be along the route we were going to go, and it started misting rain. Kind of got wet. We both got wet. Made it back to the house. That was the end of that. Went to Walmart with my daughter. Got some steps in there. Been on the treadmill a couple of times. It's all good. But the point, what I'm getting at, is not a good day to go out and find something to make a video about. And I have a YouTube channel, which is as surprising to me as it is to you. But what do YouTube content creators or whatever YouTubers do? They create content. And so what I've got here, and it's actually pretty interesting, I think. Recently I went on a tour at San Felipe de Austin. And that's where Stephen F. Austin and what is called the Old 300 families, his dad had gotten permission to settle in Texas from the Mexican government, but Stephen F. Austin's dad died before he could do that. So Stephen F. Austin picked up the baton and he made it happen. And they settled in what's now the town of San Felipe, Texas. It's called San Felipe de Austin. The Stephen F. Austin State Park is there. And I expected the tour that I went on. I saw there was a tour, and I went down there, and I was very interested in it. And I thought it would be the tour would be about the settlement and what Stephen F. Austin did and the families and everything. And as the tour unfolded, I realized there was a reason that was called the San Felipe de Austin Nature Tour, because the focus of the tour was different than what I expected. It was about three things. The practical things that those people used, because you can't build a community without construction materials, wood and making bricks and those type of things, the practical things you need to create a town. And the other thing is medicine. People got sick back then, and they didn't have a CVS pharmacy or a Walgreens, and they didn't have Walmart, and they didn't have shopping centers. They had to live off the land. So the three things were the practical things you need to build things, and medicine, plants with medicinal value, medicinal qualities, and food and things to eat and drink, water, and plants and animals to eat. That's what the tour was all about. So anyway, this is a clip. I did a lot of videoing there, and I kind of had that in the can, so to speak. Haven't used it. This is a little bit of it, and it is about the toothache tree. And I think it's pretty interesting.
So remember I said way back when that the sort of three categories of things they found when they came that they could use: things that were practical like lumber, wood; things that were medicinal, which we're going to talk about now; and things they could eat or drink like water. So if you were here, we get a lot of school kids, thousands of a year, come through here, and I ask them, who here has ever had a toothache? And of course, most of them say, yeah. What'd you do when you had a toothache? I had one kid tell me not long ago, I ate some more candy. Yeah. I said, well, that might be why you have the toothache, but most of them say something like, I told my mom and dad. And then what had happened, they took me to the dentist, and I had a cavity or I had a tooth pulled or whatever. And yeah, did the dentist give you something to make it less painful? Yeah. Well, if you lived here in the 1830s. First of all, in the early to mid to late 19th century, when they learned to use ether, they had no painkillers. First of all, they had no dentists. Dentists were not trained outside of big places like London and Paris. So most of the time in a community in that period of time, the barber would do, which is why they have the red and white poles, because the bloody towels wrapped around the pole to dry. And so barbers did most of the dentistry, and most of it was, well, let's yank that sucker. And so if you went to a barber, if you were lucky to be in a place where you found a barber, lucky is a relative word, they might take you to the barber and he'd have something like this called a tooth key. And the hook part at the bottom would wrap around your tooth. And then just as you might imagine, they'd take this handle and start twisting and yanking the tooth out of your head. And it was brutal, to say the least, almost like torture. Somewhere I have a picture from around 1840 where the poor patient is sitting in a chair and the barber is about to do his work in the poor guy's mouth, and there's a guy behind him who's got his foot propped on the back of the chair and a towel across the forehead of the poor patient, and he's pulling back, and the chair is tilted back, and he's like pulling with all his strength so that guy can't move his head. And so you can just imagine how horrible that was. Well, in a town like this, it was not even that nice. They'd say, well, let's go find the blacksmith. And the blacksmith would say, hey, kid, which tooth hurts? And he'd say, this one here. And he'd say, Mom, Dad, hold him down. And they'd take a big pair of tongs and yank it out of there. You feel better now? No, I'm scarred for life, But they learned that you could go down into the forest and find something called the Texas toothache tree. Its real name is the prickly ash. It has a lot of nicknames, which I'll tell you some based on its properties and some based on just how it looks. And we're going to walk down into the forest. It's a little bit downhill, but it's only about 20 feet. But remember, what goes down must come up. So it's a little bit of a climb to come back up, but it's really not far. And then we'll take a look at that, talk about it, and then we'll come to the hotel for some 1830 style refreshment that we'll talk about. Let's let everybody catch up. So the prickly ash, also nicknamed known as the Texas toothache tree, also because of its weird look, it's sometimes called Hercules Club because it kind of looks like a caveman club, or sometimes called the Devil's Walking Stick. And because of its properties, sometimes it's called the tickle-tongue tree or the pepperwood tree, and there's any number of others. And here's one right here, a small one. There's another one back there, and one here that the storm got, and then Sherry's pointing out a really large one there. If you scrape off the bark, you'll find the inner bark. And if you chew that inner bark, it has a natural anesthetic. You'd have to have a bad toothache to want to do it because it doesn't taste good at all. I'm one of the dumb ones who've tried it. And your mouth will begin to tingle, and it'll go numb. And depending on how much of it you eat, it'll get number. And then the blacksmith can do his evil deed, and you won't hurt quite as much. It'll still be a horrifying experience, but it won't hurt. So this is just one example of the medicinal things that Native Americans taught Spaniards and Anglos to use and find here. And since the CVS and the Walgreens were not open yet, my favorite thing about them is that they are one of the preferred homes of the giant swallowtail butterfly, which is the largest butterfly in North America. Here's one. If you come here in the spring, because we have so many toothache trees, you'll find a lot of these guys flying around. And these are particularly clever little things. They learn for self-protection. Well, you know that it's something like, maybe you know the number exactly, it's like 86% of all caterpillars and cocoons are eaten because they're fat and juicy and full of vitamins and stuff. So raccoons, birds, you name it, love to eat them. So not that many of them survive. So the giant swallowtail have learned a couple of survival techniques. One is that they only move around at night, so they can't be seen. The other one is they've learned to disguise both their caterpillar and their cocoon to make themselves look like bird poop. And here's an example of one. This one's still caterpillaring and this one's cocooned.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you're a bird and you landed on something and you saw one of those one of those two things there, you'd say,
Nah, nothing here.
Bird poop, moving on. And so that's one of the, as I say, the survival, I don't know if behavior is the correct word, but one of the survival tricks, adaptation that they've learned over time.